with foods, and I'm back with another live video. This past week I was surveying my email list and the members I have inside the private Facebook group, and I got an overwhelming response as what is inflammation and pain and how can we address it with diet, with the food we eat. So as always when I'm live, my internet connection is weak. I don't know why is that, but it is. So let's start by first, because anytime we talk about concepts like inflammation or even food or carbohydrates or fat, whatever we're talking about, we want to define the terms to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about, right? We're on the same page. So inflammation is the normal response that our body produces when it's attacked. It's under attack, whether it's a physical injury, a chemical injury, a viral or microbiotic injury. Our body's normal response in its attempt to protect ourselves and to support healing is inflammation. And what does it mean? It produces a class of several chemicals that have anti-inflammatory properties and some that have inflammatory properties, as well as it sends white blood cells to the area of where the injury happened, and that initiates a fighting and healing process. So that's the definition of an acute inflammation. Again, it's the normal response of our body, how it is characterized usually by signs of pain, swelling, redness. So that's how we know there is an acute inflammation going on. A good example would be if you cut your finger, or if you have a toothache, like for instance, a gingivitis, or just like I said, you cut your finger, so you can see swelling going on. It's tender, sensitive to touch, gets red and inflamed. So that's the normal response. That's acute inflammation. Now when things are working well, whether you have a acute inflammation going on outside on your body or it's happening inside your body, take as an example the arterial wall. Once the process, the body fought the invader and healed the injury, it will stop the process of inflammation. It will produce more anti-inflammatory mediators than inflammatory ones, and the inflammation process sits. However, if things are not going well, then the inflammatory process continues at a low grade. It's called chronic low-grade inflammation, which is usually below the threshold for pain. You don't necessarily know you have this low-grade inflammation going on. So, and that's, again, the classic example would be the arterial plaque, that it's formed inside our arterial walls. It's like an ongoing low-grade inflammatory process that never ceases. It continues to go on, and anyway, it leads to a big arterial plaque, which can lead to rupture, and from there we can have a stroke or heart attack. The process is rather complex, but going back, so we have two types of inflammation. We have acute inflammation, desirable, normal response of our body, and we have chronic silent inflammation, which is not desirable. It's an out of balance process that's going on in the body that now we know it's found as being one of the root causes or one of the factors that fuels many of the chronic degenerative conditions. Some of them would be type 2 diabetes, again cardiovascular disease, obesity, arthritis, autoimmunity, so you can think rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, MS, and even autism. It's an inflammatory process, and not to say cancer as well has inflammation as one of its root causes as well, or a factor that is fostering, is supporting that disease. So now that we understand what inflammation is, right, that we have two kinds, and the one that we really need to worry about is the silent chronic inflammation that's not easily detectable by pain or other signs. The question is, does our diet have anything to do with inflammation? Can it cause inflammation? Or if it doesn't cause inflammation, can it support an inflammatory, a low-grade chronic inflammatory process going inside our body? Can it foster? Can it fuel it? So the answer to both questions is actually yes. There is such thing as inflammation caused by our diet, and there is such thing as inflammation, silent inflammation, being driven by our diet. So if it wasn't caused at the beginning, if you have a diet that's inflammatory in nature, and I'll explain what that is in a second, it will continue to fuel that silent chronic inflammation that is actually going out of control, and it's corroding you at the cell level. It affects the way the mitochondria functions, which is your organelle for energy production. It affects the way you metabolize nutrients. It affects the way you detoxify at liver and cellular level. So it's very, very bad when it comes to health. If you want to heal your body from any chronic degenerative condition, you have to take into account silent inflammation, and you have to think diet. And diet is not the only factor. Of course, it's sleep, it's stress management, it's movement, it's supplements you take, it's chemicals you are exposed to from the environment or from food. It's multifactorial, but today we are talking about the ultimate anti-inflammatory diet, the AIM, as I like to call it. So when it comes to our diet, of course, eating a processed food diet, and again, we have to go to the definition. What is food? So if you eat processed foods that we normally see today in our supermarkets, just by nature of being processed, avoided of nutrients and fortified with synthetic nutrients, and being highly processed from its natural original form, that in itself is not nourishing, and it's inflammatory. But that's very broad. What it comes down to when we talk about foods, from the foods we have today, we look at the macronutrients and how they contribute to inflammation. And macronutrients, and that's why food is so powerful. Food affects metabolism because it interacts with hormones in our body. And one class of hormones that it is involved in inflammation is called eicosanoids. It's complicated. You don't have to remember technical terms, and I don't want to get too technical. But remember, this class of hormones is actually made in our body from fats. To be more precise, from the essential fats. So essential means we have to acquire those from our diet. So we have the omega-6 fats and the omega-3 fats. They are essential. We need to get them from the diet. And you've heard it before. Omega-6, they're named are inflammatory fats. Omega-3 are your anti-inflammatory fats. Now I'm going to explain how this fits into the picture. So when we eat those fats, omega-3s and 6s, in our body, they get converted. They go through a sequence of processes or of transformations, metabolic transformations, and are ultimately converted into a class of hormones or prostaglandins that can be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. Now, omega-6 fats tend to be converted more into the inflammatory prostaglandins or eicosanoids. And what drives that process, what makes more of those omega fats to turn into inflammatory prostaglandins versus anti-inflammatory, is actually a hormone that has also a lot to do with our diet, and that's insulin. So Now, if you think what makes your body produce insulin, right? It's another major macronutrient, it's carbohydrate. Now you already know that you have two macronutrients that directly can cause control or make your body to produce inflammatory eicosanoids or yeah, let's keep their name, eicosanoids or anti-inflammatory. So depending on what type of fats you eat and how much and what type of carbohydrates you eat, you may drive inflammation or you may slow down inflammation or bring it back under control if it's out of control, if it's this chronic silent inflammation. So do an oil change, and I've said this many times, and work around your carbs. Carbohydrates are inflammatory due to their through the insulin involvement in inflammatory processes as well as through other mechanisms. So it's wise to take a good revision and look at what is in your plate and eat clean carbohydrates that do not spike insulin production in your body. Those are the carbohydrates that don't convert into glucose easily because of the way we metabolize them, because we're not herbivores, right? We're not cows or horses or elephants, so we don't have the same digestive tract, we don't have the same gut flora that is able to break down those carbs and convert them into energy. So they kind of pass through and clean up us. So these are your non-starchy vegetables. And then do an oil change. Get rid of vegetable oils. So going back to what is your main source of omega-6 fats is your vegetable oils, soybean, canola, corn, and actually canola is more of the omega-3 fat, but because most people cook with it and it's a rather man-made fat, it fits in the highly processed industrialized oils, and again it's a very sensitive fat to heat, so I never recommend cooking in polyunsaturated fats like omega-3 canola oil. So I would put in the same category. So you have your corn, you have your soybean, you have your canola, you have mazola, you have even grapeseed oil and even avocado oil and nuts oils. I prefer you to eat the whole avocado and the whole nut versus their oils, and stick, when it comes to fats, good fats in your diet, stick with your coconut oil and other saturated fats for cooking, like butter from grass-fed cows, ghee, lard, fat that you render from roasting chicken or duck or etc., whatever animal meat you are cooking. And as your good monounsaturated fat, olive oil, olives, and then whole nuts and avocados and seeds. Of course, you will get from nuts and seeds a good deal omega-6 fat, but it's not comparable to taking it from the refined oil, because once again, those are refined oils. It's not easy to extract oils from those nuts and seeds. And they get also easily damaged by light and oxygen and all that. So to summarize, there are two macronutrients that directly drive inflammation in the body, and that's the fats you eat and the type of carbohydrates and of course how much. And that takes us into meal composition. So it's how much you eat, how and what you eat, what time you eat, how you prepare, all that matters. I hope this mini lesson on inflammation and the anti-inflammatory diet gave a little bit of light into this issue, and it gets you inspired to go there and make some changes. And as I've been saying lately, health transformation begins in the kitchen. So I invite you to download my resource guide for the 7 must-have kitchen tools so you get started with cooking healing foods. There's not cooking just anything, but healing meals, that meat and bone stock, and make some fermented foods, and roast some good vegetables, and make good salads, and all the good whole balance of macronutrients that we all need. So again, it all begins in the kitchen, and if you are confused, you don't know exactly how to start, where to start, the best place to start is get the kitchen tools, equip your kitchen, so when you go there and you pull out a recipe and you try to make it, you have all the tools you need, so you don't get set back by not having tools. And then next step is, of course, cleaning up, getting rid of what doesn't serve you, and then making a plan and making all those healing meals, which I'll be talking about more in future videos. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon. Bye.